So I'm going to show you how to create this flame with the lighting and everything, and you can just go here and light this part of the website, or maybe go up, or maybe go here, and I think this looks really cool, so I'm just gonna share it. So I'm not going to code it here, I'm just going to go over the code because I think coding it would be unnecessary and take way too much time, so I'm just going to explain it a little bit, and in the end I'm going to talk about optimization, because this is not very optimized and it probably won't run on all devices and it won't run on phones. So this is quite a problem. So we have our stateful widget here, which has an animation controller for the animation, which is set to repeat, our animated builder, a stack, and we have our mouse region here and our custom paint. We have a container which has a width of 0 and the height is set to animation controller.value, and this basically forces our widget to reset its state or repaint. I don't know why it doesn't when I don't include it, but it does when it's here, so it's working. So I'm just gonna let it here. We have our custom painter here. The should repaint method is set to true, returns true, and in the paint method we call flame.update and flame.draw. Flame.update, you shouldn't do that in a paint or draw method. I do it sometimes, but you probably shouldn't, so don't do that. I did it here, don't do that. So we have our flame class here, which is probably the most important class. We have two gradients, radial gradients, our fire gradient, where the inner circle is red, like a dark red, and the outer circle is orange, and we have our smoke gradient, where the inner circle is like black with an alpha value of 30, and the outer circle is like a dark gray. We have our two paints, fire paint and smoke paint, our particle lists, our smoke particles and flame particles, the particles that get added per tick, our start point, and our flame direction. And we have our scattering angle. The scattering angle is basically if you have the flame direction, and let's say the flame direction is straight upwards, the scattering angle says how much our particle can differ from that original direction. We have our size. So in the constructor we first make our rect that we need for our shader. It's basically just a rect around the flame. It's the starting point minus the size, and starting point minus the size for our first point, and for our second point we just add the size, so we have a nice rectangle around our flame. And with that we first create our fire shader and then our smoke shader. The fire shader has a mask filter, a blur mask filter on it. The blur style is normal, and this is Sigma. Sigma basically is 2 times the radius. So the radius of our mask filter would be 6.5, approximately 2 times the radius, not exactly. Our smoke paint has slightly bigger Sigma, so a slightly bigger radius. We have our move to function to move our flame, and because we changed the starting point, we have to recreate our rect, and with that recreate our shader. Then we have update. Update basically updates each of the particles, reiterate through the flame particle list, call update, and if the radius is smaller or equal to 0, we just remove it. Say almost the same with the smoke particles, but here if the radius is bigger or equal to 50, we remove it. This is because flame particles get smaller and smoke particles get bigger. Then we have to add particles. Particles per tick is a little lie, because it's not equal to the particles that get added, because we have a random here. So for each particle per tick, it's gonna add half a particle. So for if particles per tick is 2, it's gonna approximately add 1 particle. This is just for performance reasons. But there are more flame particles than smoke particles, because we have an additional random inside of that random. And this is our draw method. First we iterate through our smoke particle list and draw a circle for each of the particles with our smoke paint. This is what does the lighting. So we iterate through our flame particle list, and for each particle we create a radial gradient which is called light. Light has two colors. First this color, which is like a light yellow, and the smaller our particle gets, the higher the alpha value gets. So big particles are brighter and small particles are not as bright. And the second color is black with an alpha value of 45. So after that we have to create our light rect. Our light rect always has the size of size.width and size.height. We just have to move it around. And we do this by subtracting delta x and delta y from every coordinate. So it always stays the same size, but it moves around. And then we're going to draw a circle. The radius should be big enough so that it covers the whole screen. So when you make 30,000, it's going to be okay, because it's always going to cover the whole screen. 3,000 should be okay too. Maybe if someone has a 4K monitor or not, so I'm just going to set it to 30,000 just in case. And we're going to do this with our paint, where the shader is light.create shader with our light rect. And important, we have to send the blend mode to blend mode.multiply. After that, we can draw our flame particles with our fire paint. Spawn particle basically spawns a new particle. So this returns a new particle with start point.delta_x and start point.delta_y. And what this basically does is, if you interpret our flame direction as a vector, we basically just rotate our vector here by a random value, but in range of the scattering angle. And we have a selector here. If this is 0, this is going to be a fire particle, and if this is 1, this is going to be a smoke particle. So we see here, if selector equals to 0, this value is going to be this, and if it's not 0, so 1, this value is going to be this. The main difference here is this is much smaller, and here's a minus. So we have our particle class, which basically takes x, y, delta x and delta y, the radius, which is 30, and the decreased radius. So in update, we add delta x to x and we add delta y to y, and we're gonna subtract decreased radius from radius. So this is the reason why here's a minus. So if here's a minus, the particle actually gets bigger. So this is for smoke particles. And yeah, this is actually all the code. So this is not very performant, as you might think, because there are a lot of things here. First of all, mask filter.blur is not very performant, and you should probably leave the smoke particles out. They're just extra particles, and they're not there for the effect, and you can just leave them out. The second thing that you can do, okay, sure, you can use less particles, sure, but we use 2 per tick, so if we use less, the flame is not going to look as nice. So we want to stay at 2 particles per tick. But what we can do is, where is it? Draw. Here we can change the way how we light it. This is very complicated, and it has, like, for each flame particle we actually have to create a light gradient, and we have to draw the circle, and we have to send the blend mode to blend mode and multiply. We have to create a shader, and we have to draw it. That's not very performant. It's really bad, but it gives a cool effect. So it's good, but not very performant. So what you can do, you can just leave this out and just make one big circle. So you probably want to change this to 250-50 and just draw one big circle around our flame. This is not going to look as cool, but it's a bit more performant.